Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith,
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
and we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 110 for June 13th, 2022. Outlook has a new version, and the productivity news this week. We are going to, of course, do the productivity news and then the technology news. And first, we start off with our articles from the productivity world. Augusto, what is our first article this week?
The first article this week came in Axios and is the world's largest test for a 4-day work weeks begun in the UK. And they are, I think it's around 2,500 employees. No, 2,500. Uh, where is the number? It was a
3,000
very
employees.
large 3,000 employees. Sorry, 3,000 employees are all going for 3 months to work or to try to work and accomplish their responsibilities and everything 4 days a week and having the same pay. You know, this is in collaboration. It's a couple of organizations, a couple of nonprofits, but it is interesting. I'm sure we are in the same discussions, not at the same speed, but at least similar discussions to what was when Henry Ford wanted to propose that crazy 8-hour workday that we now consider is normal. But it is going to be very interesting to follow this study and see what happened.
Yeah, I think it's good. We need to be understanding how remote work affects different parts of the economy and different parts of the working economy. And I think that it's important to see this. This is a government perspective, but I think it's also important to see if was this only government employees? I couldn't tell from the
I couldn't tell for the article either. It was a little piece and it just talked about others, but I don't know.
Yeah. So, but either way, I think it's really important to note that we have had several different large scale studies. This one, of course, is the largest in the UK, and we've gotten pretty good feedback from people. Now, again, these are short term studies. We need to see longer term effects. Ultimately, I think that giving people the ability to work in and where they're going to be best capable of doing that work is the appropriate thing, which for most people is going to be wherever they are at that moment, whether that's in the office or at home, and the circumstances of their life. And so we all need to be flexible and adaptive as employers in the face of that. And I think that rubs a lot of employers the wrong way. And unfortunately, I think in a job market like this, with the pandemic, and everything else like that, it's just the right recipe for us to push this forward. I know the article notes that, it's far from going to become the norm, but I don't think so. I think it's actually becoming the norm in a lot of ways for a lot of organizations. And we're going to have a pendulum swing back. We've seen that with some major companies, but for the most part, we've seen the introduction of it working for people, and I think more and more people are going to want that, and more employers are going to want to use that as a mechanism to both attract and retain employees.
And
All
I
right, on to our.
think, and I think,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, and I think this, 4 days week, remote, hybrid, whatever is going to be, the different companies are going to adopt different things that match on their styles. But at the end of the day, 4 weeks or hybrid and stuff is here to stay.
Absolutely, and that leads us on to asynchronous work and this article from PS News out of
I love this
Australia.
article. So, as a person who coach and work with organizations and help implementations with Nosby. Nosby is basically a tool designed for asynchronous work. That was how this tool was created. Nosby as a company is a no office company. They don't have a headquarters. They have 17 employees all over the world. And that's how the company was created. And that's how their tool was envisioned. And as a certified expert, it is very interesting when you start working with organizations and allow them to see those possibilities, especially at the higher levels. But everybody benefits, but especially at the higher level. And right now, working with manufacturing in Ecuador, in Latin America, okay, where The manufacturing obviously is asynchronous. Okay, the manufacturing is when it's happening, when it's hot, but everything else in the organization is moving to this asynchronous model. Okay, and this article really bring the principles. You need to establish the communication, how you're going to communicate very well, leverage the communication tools, then keep a schedule and a task list people need to know, and then define the roles and the expectations. And one of the things when you put a tool like Nosby is that you change that communication from that close communication and cover my back, okay, email, FYI, so I'm trying to cover in my work, to an open communication. So instead of focusing into what is the weakest link, you focus into what are the strengths of the other to move much faster. It's a great article.
Yeah, I think it's a good article, and the funny part is that all four of these tips that they provide are actually also really good tips for any organization to adopt,
It's
whether or
true.
not you're doing asynchronous work or not. So I think that it's just a refresher for all of us that, I mean, I can't imagine going into a company and not establishing a means of communication, whether the work was asynchronous or not, right? Like it would make no sense to me. And so it's really good to get these refreshers, to get these reminders that we should be establishing these things with folks. I currently have that, happening in my own company where I'm thinking through, well, okay, we have all of this technology and all these different ways in which we can communicate. Let's start clipping away the yeah, we'll use this once in a while kind of thing, and just say, no, we're not using this at all, right? The only means with which we should communicate are these things. And the reasons we communicate are for these reasons. And formalizing that and codifying it for everybody really reduces stress. And I appreciate that a lot for everyone being able to say, oh, you know what? I don't need to worry about this communication type for work. I can just focus on this one, and the world will keep spinning. We'll keep communicating, and everything will be fine. So, all right, on to our next article.
Articles make use of and is how to choose the ideal number of work hours. And the article goes into, okay, well, reconsider the 8 hours a day, calculate your current hours, how much are you really working, decide what are the perfect hours, and experiment different work days. I did a similar exercise to that many, many years ago when I decided that I wanted my work to allow me certain flexibilities. Okay? And the flexibilities were related to the kids. Okay? I wanted to be able to drop the kids at school. I wanted to be able to pick them up to school. Okay? Those were my two things. And certain things have expanded over the years, but those two things were the main things. And that went into negotiation at that time and negotiation every time after that. I don't get to the office before this hour, and I leave between this time and this time, so I can pick the kids, I can take lunch to the kids, and after their lunch and all, like, I can come back. And and even before that, I had the I had a work that, well, for the nature of the work, was a lot of hours. And I established to clients, to everybody, that between 5 and 6:30, my phone was simply unavailable. And why? Because that was the time that I had to have dinner with the kids, blah 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 blah. And at 6:30, I pick my phone again. And it's very funny, years later after this, and having now a completely different schedule to this day, if I sit on the table, okay, and I pick my phone, the first question my two kids ask is this work? Because that is the only exception to phone on the table. But it's very good because they, that's something that I'm very proud. I, I will have never there to ask my father. My father will have bring a cell phone to the table. I will have never asked to there if he was working or doing something else. And the fact that they can ask, and the fact that they ask, Tomas asked his sister, are you studying, are you working otherwise phone is not allowed. That's a healthy thing, but it's part of understanding what is this number of hours and what you want to do with these hours, instead of letting technology and the phone and everything else run over everything.
Absolutely. No, I think it's really good for us to be able to identify. I mean, it's just like biological prime time, like, identifying when you do your best work. It also is how much work can you actually accomplish in any given day. And I tend to calculate that on the week. because my routines every day help kind of buffer the amount of work I can do in any given day. So I'm aware of that. And that is one mechanism for being able to do that, is just understand your routines, creating routines that support the work you need to get done. And then from day to day, you build up into kind of a weekly bucket of work that you can do. And as a GTDer, it makes a lot of sense to me just because I'm working from week to week. But I think it works for most people. I mean, everyone follows pretty much the same 7-day week, and and traditionally we're working several of those days each week and then taking off some amount of days thereafter, whether you're part-time or full-time. Most people are working 5 to 6 days and then having 1 to 2 days off. And so you learn this kind of tempo, and I guess it makes a lot of sense for you to like consider how many hours can you actually get done in a day of like real work, right? Not coffee cooler discussion, not back and forth, trivial work, but really important work for you. And then considering what that means for your output on a regular basis. All right, on to our next story.
Our next story, it's an article from Joseph Wells, josephwells.com. I don't know how we came to this article. I don't know if I share it with you, you share it with me, or I don't remember, to be honest with you. But then the title of the article's "Action is Everything," and I thought it was an incredible reminder as we are coming now to the summer and everything else for everybody. For me, the story just will stay in the story. He said the thermometer reached 19 degrees. The wind whipped louder than the wave on the beach, and he is frozen. He just wants to be warm, and he's saying, okay, well, what do we do? Do we wait? There was a friends who invite him to go to a mountain, and they're now frozen. He said, forget the food, forget the fire. I want to feel my finger on my toes, and that is a very crude image. When you said forget the fire and forget the food, I want to feel my toes. But there is a lot of people who are on that place where all that they want is to feel those fingers and toes. And where he goes is the answer is action. And he tells the story how they pack, how they move, so they could finish the trail they were doing and they could get back to warm themselves up. And during crisis, during times of frustration, it is very hard to remember that that's the best solution and the best step forward. So, again, it's an article to remind all of us how important that is.
Yeah, and the article starts off saying that it was 19 degrees, and so for those of you who are in metric, that's 19 degrees Fahrenheit. So
Yes.
I first read it and I thought I'm presuming he means Fahrenheit and not Celsius. So this is a person probably in the States. Okay, on to our next article.
Yeah, that's -7 Celsius for whoever is wondering. So it was
Yes,
very cold.
exactly. Very, very chilly.
So the next article is there is no uh, blueprint for grief. And, the last weeks has been, as the article said, unfathomable. That is the definition, according to the articles, also in the Merriam-Webster, it's not capable of being fathomed, immeasurable, impossible to comprehend. And the article is written from a psychiatrist and it's talking about, well, how really it's okay to grieve and it's okay to grieve on your way. As a family who has been going recently through grief, as my father-in-law passed recently, it was a great reminder, and with all that is happening, Ubalde and all these killings, it is important for all of us to remember there is no blueprint of that, and there is no way to do it faster or better. Everyone grieve in the best way they can.
I found that it was really interesting. She says here, quote, "I sometimes worry that we have over professionalized distress and over pathologized how people respond to trauma," end quote. And I can't agree with it anymore. I think that so much of what mental health professionals, and it's not really to fault them, it's just that unfortunately in, let's just use American society, we have spent so many years undervaluing mental health and saying that mental health is not as important as physical health. And always use the example. If all of a sudden I lopped my arm off and I was bleeding profusely, you would imagine that I need medical attention. But if I said that I was depressed, clinically depressed, you don't probably have the same feeling about how urgent it is for me to be able to seek care. And both require immediate urgent care. And so the industry then kind of took a pendulum swing and tried to really professionalize everything, and it made this kind of like weird place where now we all think about all of these different things as being everything has to have a formula, everything has to have a method, everything has to be empirically based in order for anyone to do anything. And it's like, no, for the rest of us, for us normal humans, we just have to experience grief the way that we experience it. And it's a part of our productivity in so many ways, right? You know, if we don't deal with our grief, it can sometimes consume our focus and attention and hurt us long term. And I think it's really important for us to keep that in mind as we all deal with all of the different types of trauma, all the different types of grief, all the different types of distress, really, that we come into contact with. So I find that to be very fascinating in that sense. All right, onward. Are we going to be doing
Onward.
the McKinsey study, McKinsey article?
I thought we were going. Yes, I skipped it for some reason. Sorry.
No worries. Hop back over to that one. Go for it.
There is a McKinsey article on the list to say if we are all so busy, why anything is getting done. And the first paragraph says, with endless meetings, instant email, thousands of companies has mastered the art of unnecessary interactions, winning in the next normal require much more focus and collaboration. It was a very interesting article, and I don't know what made me why I didn't close, whatever. But what can be done? Because what I see with my clients, exactly what this article describe. They are meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and now I have seen a lot of my clients assume that it's normal have one phone call on the left ear and one phone call on the right ear. And no, that's not normal. Okay. I mean, fine, you're doing it, but that is not normal. That should not be. Okay. It should not be that you are triple booked and then decide to go to two calls at the same time. That is not normal. That means that's a two people job, not a one people job. But we are getting that. And what it's producing is exactly what this title it says. These people is ridiculously busy for 10, 12 hours, but they have nothing to show up at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can kind of understand it on some level. I've seen so many times in a more corporate, position where you go in at the start of the day, and I would get in the office before everybody else did because of that fear that people would just suck up your time while you were actually there. And so between 7 and 9 and 6 and 9, I would get all of my work done, and then the middle of the day was just basically meetings and BS. Right? It
Mhm.
was really really difficult, and at times I would lock my door in my office and put an out of office message in my email and be really really quiet so everybody just thought I wasn't there so that I could actually get work done. And
I did that.
like it's like that kind of stuff where it's like, people just want us to soak up time for things that are not critical work. And these interactions ultimately hurt your productivity. I push back a little bit on the sense that some of this is really important for a former type of culture. And I think that as we move into kind of a new phase, we need to understand how to build culture that that doesn't only require in-person time. That is, it still requires one-to-one real-time interactions like here now between you and I. We both see and can speak to each other. Those of you who are watching or listening after the fact, it's asynchronous. But the reality is that FaceTime and the ability to kind of interact with people is important. It's what allows us to be able to bond and do all those other things. But I understand it. I feel that pain on a lot of
No,
levels.
no, I feel it. As you were describing that, you remind me how much I used to love fly from Miami to LA or LA to Miami, because basically I could download my emails, okay, get into that plane, and by the end of that flight, everything was taken care, and I just connected the web, let everything go. It was incredibly, but and I remember when I stopped to change roles and I stopped flying that much, going to lunch, that I still do it. And I still go one day of the week and I bring laptop, sit in a restaurant, okay, and I technically am out of the office and I'm really what I do is catching up. And but it's true that if you don't set those times and you don't have those skills to block certain of those times, then everything turns into a meeting. And yeah, like you, I begin those days. I used to begin my day at 4 in the morning, and I joke, but it was very serious that I accomplished most days more from 4 in the morning to 7 a.m. than the rest of the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. On to our next article from Better
So
Humans.
from better from better humans, 7 steps to skyrocket your energy. And it was interesting. Optimize your circadian rhythm was the first one. Uh, but the second one was where I got interested. uh I they took caffeine timing and they said, okay, avoid caffeine from the first 90 minutes and then avoid caffeine 10 hours before you go to bed. Okay, that it's not a lot of, not a big caffeine window for people. But what was interesting for me is a year ago I decided to quit coffee. Okay, and I was drinking 10 to 14 shot of espresso a day. Okay, whatever that is in caffeine. And I was completely immune to caffeine. It was just because I liked the hot thing and the taste, not because it was doing really anything for me. And what is interesting is a year later, I keep still one coffee and it's my week review. Okay, if I have week review, I make a coffee and all that. And it's still to this day, I'm continue immune. I can have that coffee and that doesn't wake me up. That doesn't do any of the things. And I was always jealous of those who say, oh, if I have a coffee at 2 p.m., I will not sleep until tomorrow. You know, always jealous of those. But they go into that. But again, if you're sensible, pay attention to those 3 points. Nutrition, that I cannot agree more. Work on your ultradian rhythm and plan. And they say take time each evening to plan the following day. And I have said that we need to learn not to deal with terrorists. The person who plan what time you're going to work in the morning is not the same terrorist who wake up when the alarm sound. Okay, that guy in the morning, you need to be treated as a terrorist. There's no negotiation. The time was established, and we're moving forward.
Fantastic. Okay. Onward to our next and final productivity article.
How to successfully balance full-time job and a side hustle without burnout. I have done this for many years, and I think it's a matter to, I agree with certain things on the article. Plan your time carefully. Don't. But for example, the second one was don't blur the boundaries. I have never had those boundaries. I have never had, oh, this is the time for personal, this is the time for work. But what I will say is don't blur the devices, because when you blur the devices, it's very hard for the brain to make the switch. If you have two jobs and you have two different devices, your brain will connect immediately in which device and therefore which work it need to do, and you will work much efficiently. It's similar to what I've been saying for years: have a browser for work and a browser to play. If you are the person who handle more than one job or one job and a side job, get a different device for each, and that will allow your brain to make a much better connection.
Yeah, I've made the determination not to have different devices for every, like, you know, business, so to speak, but I have the different browsers, and so each browser is coded and colored, and so everywhere I can color it, the color is always the same. So I see the color on
Mhm.
every place that I'm working, and that clues my brain in immediately that that's for this kind of work and nothing else. And there are times when it does have to blur over because some account won't log in at that moment inside of this Chrome profile, and so I've got to go to the other Chrome profile to log in, that kind of nonsense. But it really does help you kind of put your blinders on and focus on that type of work and clue into it very quickly. I liked generally the advice here. I think that hearing some people talk about having, like, there was one article about a gentleman who had two full-time jobs, and he was working without the other employers knowing that he had the two jobs, and he was doing it because he had worked himself into debt and was trying to get out of the debt, and it made a lot of sense. And he still does it to this day, and like it's like he works for an insurance company doing something, and then he works for some other company doing something else, a furniture company. And was that a New York Times article? I can't remember, but he didn't give his identity for purposes of not letting either
Right.
employer know he was doing this. But the way in which he couched it was that as long as he had time bucketed throughout the day for each of the positions, he was able to really navigate so that meetings didn't overlap. And that was his biggest issue, is that he needed to make phone calls during a specific period of time of the day, and he needed to be able to have meetings with his primary employer. So I think it depends on the primary job, and it depends on the side hustle, how you kind of keep those pieces in mind. Being my own boss, I don't have that kind of imposed structure, right? I can use my time how I want to throughout the day, aside from client meetings and so on and so forth. And so just knowing how your primary work needs to be done, and if you have a side hustle, how that's going to be done, I think it's just a matter of sitting down and thinking through, okay, what needs to be done in what time frames, and can those not be in conflict, right? Because it's where the conflict happens
Right.
that's the problem, and then you can deal with it otherwise. So just recognize there's going to be times when you're going to have issues, right? There's just going to be issues on occasion, and you just have to deal with those things. All right, we have completed our productivity articles for the show. That means we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor this week, Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club. And when we get back, we'll do the tech articles and then our story of the week. We'll see you after the break.
While working in person may be normal for you, it's unlikely your coworkers are as interested in being productive as you are. Or working remotely or from home can be isolating, and there's something powerful about being with productive people, even virtually, that helps you be more engaged. If a flavor of these sounds familiar, Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club is for you. Co-working Space is a virtual work community designed to help members be more effective and efficient in their work and personal lives. At its core, we provide goal tracking and host focused action sessions throughout the week for accountability and camaraderie. Visit anythingbutidle.com/coworking to learn more. Co-working Space lives inside Personal Productivity Club, a digital community for personal productivity enthusiasts, so you can find people who use methods and tools you do too. Again, head over to anythingbutidle.com/coworking to see how Co-working Space can help you be more productive. And now, back to our show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Anything But Idle. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith, joined with Augusto Pinaud for the second half of the show, in which we are going to talk about the technology articles this week. Augusto, what is our first tech story?
So iPhone and Apple people can now download Google TV from the App Store and buy and connect and see stuff. And this is great. This will improve. One, I think you should be able, regardless of the device, being able to access the Google, the Netflix, the Amazon, the Apple, and everything else, and pick which one is the one you like the most. And I think finally having this, it's going to be good for Google. It's going to be good for the Apple TV. It's going to be good for everyone. When the tide race, all the ships in there go up.
Well, I'm so pleased because I have a Google TV at home, and my phone,
Mhm.
of course, gives me the ability to control the television. We have a Shield, running the television, which has Google TV on it, and of course, I pull up in my iPad, which I like to have when I'm watching television, just kind of doing other things. I'm not able to control the television from the iPad, and it was very frustrating. And so they're solving that kind of problem where you have multiple different mobile
Mhm.
platforms inside of the same household. It just makes sense for Apple to have approved the Google TV app within the App Store. And so I'm glad to see. I'm not sure what took so long, whether that was a Google problem or an Apple, belligerence. I'm just glad to see them working together, and both with Matter, right, and supporting the Matter IoT world, but now with having Google TV in the App Store means that iOS users don't have to suffer if they live in a household where they have an Android Shield or a Google TV product running their television. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. I mean,
I
I
agree.
have I have multiple different TV platforms on my connected to my television. So, you know what I mean? Like I want to be able to use any device to manage any of them. So, I think it's important for Apple to and Google to just give us what we want, which is ease
Yep.
of use. All right, on to our next story.
So PWAs on Chromebook may soon support multiple in-app tabs. I wish that means we are going to be able to put tab by tab, side by side, because that's the best way to see certain things. But the idea that this was apparently a feature longly requested in 2018. Finally, it's coming in 2022, and you are going to be able to have one app, one PWA to have those multiple tabs. There are things that I don't want to have on the browser that I really love, that I can do a PWA, that I can do even a PWA on my iPad. As a NOSBI certified expert, I love the fact that I have the iOS app, but even better, okay, that I can run that one as the developer version, and then I have a PWA that runs the stable version. So if I am working, I always have a stable version, and it's a fantastic way to have two applications installed in my iPad.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to see this. I mean, the example they give is actually one that I would use all the time, which is
That
the
is
Twitter
Twitter.
app. Yeah, the Twitter application just having multiple tabs open. What would be really nice if Twitter was able to, like Google, have multiple instances of different Twitter accounts open at the same time. It doesn't allow that. You have to be logged into only one at a time. Although, for those who don't know, we're all about productivity here, right? Like if you have multiple Twitter accounts, you can log in up to 5 Twitter accounts in the same browser. And then you can just switch between those. And it's very simple, easy, and I love it because I do have multiple Twitter accounts. Of course, I have many, many more Twitter accounts than 5. So I am I am I'm a little frustrated by the 5 limitation, but for most of you, you should be able to log into your 1 or 2 different Twitter accounts in the same browser, and you could just switch back and forth between them. Having a PWA support multiple tabs means that you could have your home feed open in multiple lists, which means that you could get rid of your home. I don't know who follows their home feed. You shouldn't. Create a specific lists and follow those lists so you're seeing the tweets you want to see from the people you want to see strategically, and then get the heck out of Dodge, right? And so the idea here is to be very strategic with your time as it relates to these things, and having multiple tabs gives you that control. But I could see a whole bunch of places, like for example, Asana. Asana has, each workspace is weird and each project is weird, kind of switching back and forth between things. I could have the Asana PWA app, open, so to speak, and then have different tabs for different projects open, and then you're not losing the work that you need to get done. I like having each of those projects open, but that means I have to have a browser tab open for each of them in order to be able to run it. The desktop app doesn't allow me to. So it's really nice to be able to have that kind of flexibility. So I'm hoping this actually the code that they're seeing actually comes into play in the next release. All right, next up.
Next up is finally Google Drive on the web will allows you to do copy, cut, and paste. What took that long? I don't know, but it's finally there. You will be able to do that. And if that will not be enough reasons to be happy, Google Drive finally fixed my biggest complaint with Google Drive. That is, you drop a file in there, and if you don't remember the name, it's impossible to find because their location is this mystery, okay, that it makes no sense to me. I like folders and files and put my things in little boxes inside of little boxes, and Google Drive has never allowed me to do that. But now, finally, will tell me the location of my file, and that will allow me to maybe put some organization to that craziness that they create. So I
I'm
am very happy with those two things.
I'm going to throw a little bit of water on this for some of you out there. So, controller command C, V, and X are all going to be operating and working well with files inside of Google Drive on the web. They will not work for folders. So you cannot copy and paste a folder. You can't cut a folder and place it somewhere else. You still need to right click, move, or click on it and use the menus to move it manually through the system. Or what I most do on the web is you find where you want it to go on the left hand navigation, open up the folder, and then drag the folder from there to the location. But you can't copy or cut it and then paste it where you want it to go. And that's just a continued limitation of the browsers. I'm hoping they get there and really get us to a place where they can do that. But there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes when you copy and or cut something from the browser. You're doing a lot of stuff in the back end, and just if your internet connection is not good, all of those things, they're really trying to work around those things. And I fully agree with you. I'm really glad they finally fixed the showing your file location. Like it made no sense that they didn't show your file location more easily. And so giving you the ability to do that now, I think is great. All right, on to Chrome 102.
Okay, 102 arrived. They allowed you now to reorder the tabs. You can do shortcuts. You can capture control tabs. They did a lot of things. They also improved the screen magnification. The USB-C cable now let you know, hey, this cable is not the cable that you should use for display properly, or to even when you connect a low power charger, they tell you, hey, this is a low power charger. All that is great. So this day, Google decided to make the default this program that they call Cursive. That's now an app. By default, if your machine do not install it by default, you can go to the link and open. Google launched that application with the HP Chromebook X2. Fantastic. Except that for a reason that I don't understand, Google took the decision to limit this thing to Chromebooks. Okay? Really, you have an incredible platform. Okay, the ability to be the first application who works seamlessly, okay, between the Macs, PC. Okay, Mac. Let's say Mac doesn't have handwriting, but PCs do. Chromebooks and iPad. You made a PWA. Why are you need to be like that and don't allow it to run on every machine? Sorry, this is not a limitation on the browser or the technology. It's a decision that somebody makes that it makes no sense from my humble perspective.
Yeah, I don't know why they made this decision. When I was thinking about it, I was thinking that perhaps it's because of the machine learning that they're doing, and whether they're doing it on the device or whether they're doing it in the cloud, and whether or not that made a difference. I'm likely to fall on your side here, though, which is to say that they could have probably pushed the envelope to make this work just across the board as a PWA and taken out the features that maybe wouldn't work. I can't imagine. I can't imagine that the little bit of ML that it's doing would cause that much of a hiccup. And besides, if it works on a Chromebook with low powered resources, it's certainly going to work on a Mac. So with strong hardware. So I'm curious why they made that decision. I'm guessing they made it to just give Chromebooks an edge for a while, and then eventually they'll make it broader, and then it'll be, oh look, they're expanding it to the rest of devices across the board. Now again, this does require you to be able to have a stylus to be able to write on screen. So not making it available to other devices may be an OEM issue, right? Which is that only so many OEMs are going to support the stylus or the styli that are necessary for it. So either way, I'm glad to see it. I also will note that one of the things that kind of quietly rolled out in 102 is that now PWAs. I know we keep talking about the PWAs, but really they're the future. And I'm sure we're going to get some more hate comments. But but the reality is that PWAs got the ability to do file handling. So you can now set a file type to a PWA in Chrome 102, which means that you can say, hey, you know what, this PWA for my mail app now can be tied to email files. So when I click on the default mail handler to send this type of file, it can actually get picked up by an application and then be used by that application. So if you have a .eml file, you can tie the .eml file to the Outlook PWA. So when you open it from the browser, it'll automatically register that and open it in the PWA. So I'm really excited here to see, like, there are some PWA photo editors. There are some really good PWA video editors, and now you can tie those file types to your PWA. And instead of it opening an Android application or opening in the browser, it's now opening in the PWA directly. And
that is awesome.
That really puts the pieces of the puzzle together now. And now the drag and drop, I mean, a lot of people don't know, but now the drag and drop between web browser windows, capable of dragging a file from one web browser window to another and into the system, that's going to be very, very powerful as well. I mean, they're becoming full-fledged application ecosystems. So I'm hoping they're paying attention to security. I hope they're paying attention to the details to make sure that PWAs aren't causing me stress when I'm trying to do stuff and not having features. Here's looking at you, Microsoft, with Outlook. But we'll get to that when we get to the featured story. But the reality is that we're seeing far, far more powerful PWAs, and we're seeing now the underpinnings, the infrastructure of giving us this kind of native file handling. So very excited to see. All right, on to our next story.
Well, our next story is also about the Chromebook. And as school are ending, people is thinking, okay, should I buy a computer for next year? Should I buy a computer for my kids in the summer? Are Chromebooks good? And there are a couple of things I say. And you need to understand that if your kid get a Chromebook on the school, your kid is getting most likely the lowest of the lowest of the lowest of the Chromebooks. Okay. But there are many things that the Chromebooks can do and for which they are very, very good. You can run Linux, you can do shortcuts, you can do gesture for productivity, you can have virtual desktops, dark mode, link to Android phones. And the reality is that it's not, if you need to run Windows or Mac apps, yeah, it's not. But for most of what most kids are going to do, play Roblox, play Minecraft, they will be able to do it in that thing perfectly well and for a quarter of the cost.
Well, if you had a Chromebook with Windows 365, technically you could run Windows on a Chromebook.
Yeah.
But no, I think that it's really important to remember that the Chrome OS platform is becoming more and more robust every day, and we're seeing a platform that can run on ARM chips and run really competent software, and that becomes a very interesting competitor to the other desktop operating systems. And for, let's call it a semi-open source. It's not really open source, in terms of operating system, because it's Google Chrome, Google on top of the Chromium OS operating system. But we do have Chromium OS, and with Chromium OS, we have all of the other Linux distributions out there in the world. And we already know that Linux runs most of the world's computers, because most of the world's computers are actually servers, and so that a lot of them are running Linux. And I'm always interesting, or Linux distro. I mean, because really Linux is the kernel. On top of that is really the operating system. And so I'm just really interested to see, like in 5 years' time, where Chrome OS will be comparative to Windows. At that point, I guess Windows uh, 11 or 12, I guess 12 or 13 that is, and we'll see Mac OS in a couple more variations forward, and probably on an M3 or M4 chip, and so we're going to start to see some really interesting things kind of play into this market. And I think a lot of it plays well for our personal productivity, because we're actually capable of taking this tech and starting to bleed away the differences between the different operating systems in terms of core functionality. They can all probably do the same things. It'll be these kind of nice to have features, these preferential features that get built on top of the platforms. And I see Apple doing more of this than Microsoft, and but I see Chrome really bringing up the rear guard and really working to create seamless experiences. For example, they're starting to connect the phones to the Chrome OS operating system. Apple's had that for many years, but it's nice to see Chrome OS do this. Windows keeps saying they're going to do it. They keep saying they're going to push it out. I have not seen the connectivity with Windows 11 and my Android phone, and I would really like to see more of that be real. Like, they keep talking about it, they keep showing off these fun features, but I haven't actually seen it work in my own world. I want to be able to pull up an Android application on my Windows 11 machine and just use it. So I really look forward to seeing some of these pieces come together in that sense. All right, on to our next story, some good reader news, good e-reader news.
So the next one is e-readers news, and Amazon is trying a new reading mode called the Bionic reading, where they are trying to make the letters. Amazon has been playing for a while with the fonts and trying to find better phones. The name's escaping me right now, but they even create one form for people who is dyslexic, so they could read and use the product and use Kindle. And this one is designed to ease the reading, so you can stay reading longer. And basically, what it do is highlight part of the word, and then the other part of the word is lighter. And what tried to create with that is that it moved to artificial points on the focus as you are reading. So it's a very interesting thing what they're trying to do. It's not yet for the iPhone, uh, the Kindle, but I'm sure it's a matter of time for that to be implemented on that API from Amazon in many other places.
Yeah, I think that if it can help dyslexics, people with dyslexia, I think if it can help folks who are interested in reading consistently, I think those are good things there. I always worry about these, speed reading gimmicks, and so, but we'll see. I think
But
this is
they
cool.
mentioned this is not a speed remit.
Right,
They
right,
they they mentioned on that this is not meant to do speed reading. It's meant to help keeping you focusing or
right.
focused on what you are reading.
Absolutely. Yep. I like it. I like the concept. It sounds sound, and I look forward to seeing it work. All right, on to Barnes and Noble, introducing a new e-reader to compete with the
Put this
Kindle.
article because I needed to ask the question. Okay, Barnes and Nobles introduced a quote unquote cheap e-reader to compete with the Kindle. But their cheap e-reader, it's really, well, $30 more than the cheapest Kindle and $20 less than the Paperwhite. So yeah, it is cheaper comparing to what they had before. But why are you going to buy that unless you have hate from Amazon? In which case, go and buy Kobo. But are I'm going
I
to
would
stay
imagine
in my
that'll.
soapbox and say nothing.
Yeah, I imagine this has to do with you being like, if you're a Barnes and Noble member and you're paying for the subscriber membership, and the e-reader is giving you the additional benefits. I think it more is a I'm already paying, whatever it is every year to be a Barnes and Noble member, and the discounts and all of the other privileges that come along with that membership tied to the e-reader. That's the best argument I can make for this this Nook Glowlight 4E. It really doesn't make a lot of sense otherwise, right? And you're talking about a smaller catalog on the Nook in terms of
Mhm.
ebooks. You're talking about being outside of really the norm in almost every category. I'm appreciative that Barnes and Noble's still doing this. I mean, it's giving Amazon competition, and I think Kobo does well enough to stay as competition to the Kindle ecosystem. But you can't have basically a monoculture when it comes to literature, right? Because all it takes is one despot to come out and do something to Amazon, and then ebooks disappear and start to disappear from the world's democracies. So I am comfortable with having you know an option, even if it's not the best option coming out of Barnes and Noble, and I hope that they stay purely for that reason. Who's is it New York Times that says democracy dies in the dark? Really, if we don't have an educated populace, and we are not putting books in the hands of people to be literate and to be discerning, then we get where we are right now, in at least the United States, where we are on the precipice of this weird political environment where we have basically fascists angling, and not to be political, but like, you're either an American and a patriot, or you're not. And like, part of this is really a literacy issue, low literacy, to be specific. And this has nothing to do with college degrees or pedigree or anything else like that. Really, we just need to have literate Americans, and they would see through kind of this farce. And so I think that ties back to this Nook Glowlight 4E, because we need to have as many different options and opportunities to make it easy for people to be able to read and have access to literature. So I, you know, I feel bad, but I also feel bad for Barnes and Noble in some way, shape, or form. But I also am glad that they're there. All right, on to Google and the Meet and Duo saga.
To let you talk about that because I remember show past, and I should have looked what was the show, and I didn't. Where we talk about that, and we said, "Oh well, they're not going to do that," and here comes my dear Google friends doing that.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure the article is as up to date as I think. Well, maybe it's more up to date than I have known it to be. But basically, the current Meet application is going to be called Meet Original, and the Google Duo app, which is the video calling app service, is going to become Meet in some other fashion. I'm not sure whether it's going to be Meet Duo or whatever else. But my understanding is that the Duo app is going to be called Google Meet, and then Google Meet's going to become Meet Original. And I don't know if that's like set in stone, but Google Meet's going to get a bunch of Duo features, and Google Duo is going to get a bunch of Meet features, and we're all going to be confused for a very good amount of time. That's the best I can say for all of this. I think it makes a lot of sense, though. Google is attempting to take um, the best of their application ecosystems and merge them together. And I still don't understand why they didn't just upgrade Hangouts by rebuilding it from the ground up to be Google Meet and to be Google Duo and whatnot, and then just take everything that was Hangouts and called Google Meet Hangouts, right? They could have done all the building in the background and then just replaced the services over time, and it would have been seamless for us as users. But they kind of just kept pulling different pieces apart and putting pieces back in, and it really didn't make a lot of sense. And I still don't see an end game here. And I know we've talked about this about 25 episodes ago, where I sat back and thought, yeah, I just don't understand. Why do they do this? And I still don't understand. And I don't think there is a good way to understand what their end game is here. But I hope that when they're all done with Google Meet and Meet Original, we have a cohesive application that allows us to be able to communicate with people. And I don't know whether that includes chat, Google Chat, that is, and where really that all comes down. But we're going through the change, so buckle up. All right, on to
Welcome.
on to Google Chat.
Google Chat now and warns a banner to protect against phishing, and it's letting you know, hey, this invite is suspicious and all that. All help people can get, I think, is good. I haven't seen it or haven't seen any of that. I don't know if you have.
I've not yet, but I only communicate with people that I know inside of Google Chat,
Yeah.
and so you may have seen this already in Gmail, not you, Augusto, but anyone who's heavily using Google Workspace with external parties. You may have seen this in Gmail. You may have also seen this in Google Drive. It's the same set of notifications and the same level of malware and or phishing. Basically suspicious activity that it sees happening. And I'll also note that if you're a Google Workspace administrator, really pay attention to your virus total reports. So if you're receiving those virus total reports, if you're not, you can go ahead and turn them on if you're in a plan that supports virus total, and and pay attention because you'll see when someone overrides these links and accepts them anyway, and whether or not they then become the source of an infection in the inside the company. So it is really important to kind of pay attention to some of these things. It flashes, those orange banners that says, "Hey, by the way, you're communicating without external party." And or, "Hey, this is an external party. This may be a phishing email." And then also now the red banners that are, "Hey, like this seems like this is a link you don't want to click on." So those kinds of things people need to pay attention to. You can't become numb to it because then that's how you become susceptible to
Mhm.
a lot of these attacks. All
Yeah.
right, on to YouTube.
Well, now to YouTube. How YouTube is built a better way to connect with your TV, and it say, hey, remote sucks, and YouTube is trying very hard to try. And we were talking at the beginning of the show how having the Google TV on the iOS, make it better, and having the ability your TV connected with your phone, regardless if you're Android or iOS, and that bring or manage the YouTube in the TV. It is very nice. It is very nice to be able to do that, and my kid used to with the iPad, and that's how we used to go into YouTube in the TV. So I don't know if there is goes as far as a better way to connect, but without any doubt, a much clever way than what we had.
I'm trying to remember. There used to be a social network. It was an app, and you could watch TV, and you could like basically message while you were watching the show. And it basically ran parallel to Twitter. And then, of course, it eventually went away, and Twitter just continued to be the place where people chat along while, a live event is happening. But I really enjoyed that. I really appreciated that application to be able to say, "Oh, you know what? I'm watching this show and I want to be able to kind of chat along." And I would do that many times in front of the television. That's what they're basically giving us the capability of doing through YouTube.
Mhm.
And that means that YouTube Live, so here we are, we're broadcasting to YouTube Live and to Twitter Live and whatnot. Now you can literally sit in front of your television, watch, and chat along. And I think that's a really, really powerful capability for all of us to be able to do. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the same features make their way toward other applications. So not just YouTube TV, but I want to be able to be on any number of things and choose my commenting platform and be able to then uh, broadcast to folks different messaging. Like, yeah, I feel like um, I just feel like I want to be able to sit with my iPad or sit with my phone, see what's on television, and interact with that television in more engaging ways. And YouTube gives you that capability with the ability to comment and live chat. I want to see more of that. And I don't know how Hulu or Netflix or other places make that happen without having to like build social networks around their services, but it does bring a huge community around their content, and I think that could be
Yeah.
really valuable to people. So we shall see. All right, we're done with the tech news for
We're
the
done with
day.
the tech news. We're done with the tech news. And so our next one is in the business and finance segment. And there is a Business Wire had an article talking about how the worldwide personal development industry is expected to reach 67 billions by 2030. That is impressive. impressive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. With that news out of the way, that takes us along to our featured story of the week, which is that Microsoft is putting out a new Outlook.
Oh, I'm going to say that Outlook, at least on iOS, has improved significantly. I use Outlook for a couple of things, and I had a client where they everything doing Outlook, so it's connected. I have the Outlook in my iOS for them, and it has improved really significantly. Used to I I live in Outlook for many years until I bought the first Mac, and I did not regret it not have Outlook anymore. In Turge, that was worst, but that's another story. But what they have been done with Outlook has been done very well. What they are promising to integrate together in this new Outlook mail app, it makes sense. That's probably the app where next to Teams where you spend the most time if you live on a Microsoft environment. So I think what they're announcing, it's very, very interesting, and I'm very looking forward to see it coming to reality.
Yeah, so I'll be the bearer of bad news for some folks, which is that One Outlook is coming with a some nice features. I like the idea that you can drag email over to the sidebar and create to-dos and that kind of thing. There's some really nice features associated with it.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're bringing the Loop framework, the fluid framework through Loop into the interface, which means that you'll be able to have these dynamic elements and therefore, you can embed say a calendar, and if the calendar were to change, then in the email, the calendar item would also update, so you could see the things in real time. I think that concept of loop and other pieces of the fluid framework making their way into Outlook, which is probably the primary reason for them re-archetyping the entire Outlook, that all makes sense. But that also means that they're chopping away at so many core productivity features. And so you're losing quick steps, you're losing all kinds of access to features that hardcore Outlook users are going to really be frustrated by. So if you are one of those people, I would suggest you hold out on the One Outlook for a very long time, certainly until we take note on the show that they have brought back most of the core features, and
Mhm.
that we as productivity folks, for me, when I train folks on Outlook, I'm talking about how do we utilize all of the aspects of the Outlook experience, not just
Right.
from an all-in-one productivity system perspective, which is email, calendar, tasks, and being able to bring those pieces together with contacts with people. But then, okay, let's take that beyond that and set up both our rules so that we're be capable of filtering and forwarding email and manipulating email upon receipt, but also manually being able to choose what to do with things utilizing the signature functionality and quick steps. And so I'm hoping that Microsoft, you know, understands what a fundamental shift it is for people to see this kind of interface change happen, and especially for folks who are on Mac, because this is very different than the Mac experience for a lot of people. And I know that they've had turned on the option to go to like the new Outlook for a long time, but that is not quite what, from what I'm seeing, is actually One Outlook or Project Monarch.
Mhm. I don't
So
think it is either.
I'm curious to see what they do in this next iteration to help migrate people over, and really making this, I mean, I'll say this. The interface, the UX and the UI are really nice. Like, it's fluid, the movements, things look like where they should be, right? And you can't say that about every piece of Outlook for Mac. Outlook for Windows is a little bit better, although I find it to be a little rigid in terms of its look. It just feels rigid, and it harkens back to that Metro look that they had going on there. But this is a lot softer. I like the softer feel to Outlook, especially if it's an application you got to look at all day long, and all of those things. And I like the graphics. I like the pieces and the elements of what they've put in. They've got, yeah, it's nicely done. I really like the design, but I'm really worried about the lack of features here in this first release. Now, this is just a beta, so hopefully they're going to be able to rapidly get all of the other core functionality from a productivity perspective back in, but I'm really, really hoping that's faster than slower. So we shall see.
Well, and with this, we come to the end of the show. There is a bunch of news because of all the launches, Google I/O, Microsoft, Apple. There is more than 30 more articles on the other news that the links will be there, including one that, well, as the Apple geek, that is going to be the first one on the other news list. And it's a WWDC 2022 a sketch note summary. I'm not a drawer. I don't know how to do these things, but this person got and create a full sketch note summary of WWDC, and it was very, very impressive.
Yeah, it is very, very impressive. I highly recommend that if you want to check that out. Please, if you're interested, check it out because it is a very interesting concept.
It is very impressive.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we've covered the productivity and technology news this and for several weeks past. But thanks, Augusto, for putting together the show this and every week for the audience.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right, everybody. On anythingbutidle.com, as Augusto noted, you will find all of our extra stories that we couldn't cover today, but they also include links to all the stories we did cover today, so you can check them out if you need to. You can also find our extra stories, as I said, and you'll find our text transcripts. Those are both readable on the page. Just click on that read more link. It'll expand. You can read it right there while you're listening or watching along. You can also then download it offline as a PDF and read it offline if you'd like to. After looking at the show notes, feel free to let us know if we missed anything. Stories may slip through the cracks. Feel free to tweet or DM us at anythingbutidle on Twitter. You can also use our contact form on our website there on anythingbutidle.com/contact. If you have a question or comment, same place, same way, reach out to us through Twitter or the website. And I just wanted to let you all know that we do actually have a community dedicated to anything but idle. And if you go to anythingbutidle.com/community, you will find the community group inside of Personal Productivity Club, which is the digital community for personal productivity enthusiasts, which I'm presuming you are if you're watching this. So you can join us over in Personal Productivity Club. It's free to join. We have a free community group for anything but idle. Just go to anythingbutidle.com/community and join there. This is your first time watching, feel free to subscribe to the channel or follow the page or follow the profile, and you'll see us go live when we go live weekly. And if you're listening to the podcast, feel free to add us to your favorite podcast app of choice. That could be following on Apple, subscribing as well on any other platform. It's free. Once you subscribe, the new episodes drop. And that also includes a link back to the show notes in the episode little blurb there for you. But with that, we really appreciate you watching, and we will see you all next time on Anything But Idle. Here's to your productive life.